Hello, peace lovers and peacemakers. This is Sara Jamshidi. You are watching To Peace Mindedly, a podcast show I feature peaceful bridge makers. There is a chance that you are also listening. You are listening to Peace Mindedly on the podcast program. Again, the program that I feature peaceful bridge makers. We are live on Facebook and on YouTube. So if you are watching us right now live, please do me a favor. Please share the conversation and the video. This is probably the only way that we can spread the word of peace, compassion, and kindness on the internet, especially right now that we need this kind of things, and we need kindness and compassion more than ever. My listeners, and then the other thing I wanted to touch upon is the same program is going to be available. All the information and everything that I produce here is going to be available on Goldtune, Goltune, a news magazine I manage with a group of international foreign correspondents. We write about peace and lifestyle. So after the program, check back goldtune.com and visit what we are all up for. Thanks for joining and thanks for listening. I'm looking at my notes to make sure that I'm covering all the grounds. Thanks so much for bearing with me. So I was preparing myself for this program, and I was just thinking about the questions and the introduction and all of those issues. And something, I mean, during the preparation, there was something that was very interesting or probably meaningful was happening while preparing myself for this show. You know, as a producer, we have a very interesting and awarding life. Yet at the same time, we are bombarded day and night with news and news updates and news notifications and news cycles. So every day I receive a news updates and notifications from BBC, from the Independent, a British newspaper, from New York Times, from NPR, and all of those. And for the past few months, it's been so daunting and very, very depressing, because the news is very depressing and everything is very sad. Probably one of the reasons that I started this program, just talk about kindness and compassion and some positive stories. But especially yesterday, I was at the dental office for my daughter after a prolonged appointment that we had to make. And I was sad and depressed because of George Floyd, because of coronavirus, because of all the news notifications I received. And then I was sitting in the waiting room and started rereading the book that I'm going to talk about, Three Wise Moms, Our Lessons, Your Life. At that moment, during those few minutes, something happened, I think profound. All of the sudden, I felt calm. I felt at peace, and I felt kindness in my heart. My heart was so stiff, and then all of the sudden I felt things soften in my existence around me, and brought me to this idea that wow, we are living and we are experiencing, I was experiencing at that moment, the power of words. And that is exactly what we are going to talk about, the power of words and the meaningful words that can make difference within our own life when it's really written and the intention is peaceful and meaningful. For this hour, I'm talking with Aisha Jumaan, Connie Cooper She, and Natalie Thompson. Right after this conversation, I'm talking with Shelly Kloba, representative in Washington State, and we are going to talk about how to take action and what the politicians need to do for the George Floyd's killing. But for this hour, it's Aisha Jumaan, Connie Cooper She, and Natalie Thompson. Aisha Jumaan, I know Aisha for a few years. She is one of the fierce advocate for peace and fighting against injustice, especially in Yemen, in her birth country. Aisha is a public health professional. She has worked on many health programs and projects nationally and internationally. Aisha holds PhD in epidemiology from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She has taught in various disciplines at universities, now dedicating her time to shed light on the injustice that's happening in Yemen. Connie Cooper She is marketing executive who worked with some of the world's top consumer and retail companies. They include Hershey, Procter and Gamble, and Starbucks. Connie knows money, marketing, and how to implement innovation to expand on companies' performance. Currently, she is the CEO and president of Cooper Consulting LLC. Natalie Thompson is an educator and entrepreneur. She has worked in both the private and public sectors and has done consulting for government agencies. Natalie is a senior city planner for the greater Seattle area. She cares about her daughter, Joycey, and her family. She loves to dance, cook, and drink iced tea during the sunshine. So I am welcoming Aisha Jumaan. Salam, Aisha Jan.
Alaikum salam,
Salam,
Sarah.
Natalie. Hello, Natalie, and Connie. So three great women. I want you to walk me through the process of writing the book. I know about this story, but you are going to tell me that what happened and why you decided that you wanted to write something for your daughters. So I'm going to start with Aisha, and then again, as I explained, I want us to be conversational. If something Connie would like to add and Natalie would like to add, more than welcome. But Aisha, so tell me what happened.
So actually, the person who is the instigator and not the highest priestess of this work is Connie. She, I think, was the leader of the troop and asked us to work on this project. We are very close friends. We were our three daughters. We are also mothers of only one daughter each. And our daughters were in the same grade, in the same school. And giving all the challenges that children were facing in this day and age, with a lot of bombarded, like you said, Sarah, with a lot of media showing a very distorted version of the world. We see a lot of positive things happening, which are moments of one person's lives, and these kids watch them and think this is all their lives, and then they compare their lives to that and think that they have miserable lives. So we felt that we needed to ground our daughters in reality and share with them some of our wisdom, although I know Natalie did not like the word wise, and she may want to talk about that. And again, they were at an age where it's very challenging to speak to them in person as well. So Connie's idea of putting it in a book where they can later on also go through it and learn from it.
So you said that Natalie was not supporting the idea. Did I hear it right?
Well, it was just the
Yes.
term wise. I fully supported the idea. It's just that in my culture, you do not declare oneself wise. You do not declare yourself wise. That's something that is bestowed upon you. But through conversation and negotiation, like we always do, as mothers and friends and sisters, we came to, I guess it was me, I came to peace around the title and around, I guess, perhaps many of the profound benefits of just declaring that this is wisdom for our children.
So how come, why, I mean, what is your culture that you do not declare being wise?
So I grew up in Hawaii, And I am a fourth generation Japanese American, though my family is very rooted in the island tradition. And so, there is a sense of, I guess, humility around the way one matures and becomes and ages gracefully. And so, with that humility is never something uh, that wisdom is never something that is claimed, so to speak. And so it was a very deeply ingrained cultural pattern in me that made it very difficult for me to accept that we might be calling ourselves wise moms. But then, in again, our conversation, I really realized that it's not so much about us or the wise moms, it's about the wisdom and the teaching and the learnings that get bestowed upon, first of all, our daughters and hopefully the other young people that might be reading the book. So,
Excellent. So,
yeah.
Natalie, what I would like you to do is, because we are just managing this program in our houses, so it seems that your picture has been frozen. So, I want you to refresh your page, and
Okay.
then you come to the waiting room, and I will bring you back here. So, until we hear back from Natalie, I would like to hear from Connie. Aisha said that you two are avid walkers.
Yes, we were. And then since we are not in close proximity to each other, we haven't been. I think that's a testament to our friendship is we walk when we're together. I'm just teasing, but Aisha is a dear friend and part of my heart now and forever. And during our walks and talks and our friendship with our other dear friend, Natalie, we found that our love for each other and for our daughters was a foundation that was unshakable. It was what rooted us all in the values and virtues, and really what we wanted to give our daughters and hope for our daughters. So, despite our differences in culture and religion, in size and shape, age. Yeah, I'm the youngest. No, I'm just yes, come on.
No, okay, Connie, yes, okay.
Yeah. So, despite all that, the desires of our hearts and the love of each other and our daughters was overwhelming to the point we felt like we needed to leave a legacy.
Mhm.
Legacy we wanted to capture in some permanent form.
Did they understand and felt the love? Before we go and exactly explain this, explore this conversation, this question, I just want to mention to my audience that each one of my guests are in their houses, and right now it's the lunchtime. So you hear the beep on the background, people are warming up the food and so forth and so on. It's because of that. Just wanted to mention that this is something is happening. But I mean, what was the reaction of your daughters? I'm going to go with Natalie first, and then if anyone would like to jump in, go ahead, Natalie. So what was the reaction of your daughter?
So it's really interesting. I think my daughter's reaction is more profound now, 2 years later, after the release of the book, when we had intended to share this with our daughters. So, first of all, we dedicated the book to each of our daughters. And then we shared it with them just before they graduated from high school. And then at that point, my daughter was, I think, thought it was very cool that her mom and her friends' moms decided that they would put this book together, compile some love letters, as she calls it, and then publish it. But most recently, she came to show me the highlighted areas of the book that she had really taken a deeper dive into. So about a month ago, she came with me to me with the book and said, Mom, I'm really reading this book in a very different way, and I've highlighted some real key sections that I think will really impact my life now and into adulthood. And so her response to your question, Sarah, was really, I think, evolutionary over time. And it has become more profound, which was the intent of the book, the gift that keeps giving. So every time, hopefully, our daughters read it, they glean something new and more profound.
Yes. So what was, I would like to know the influence the book had on other moms. But before we go there, I wonder, yeah, let us answer this question, and then I ask a follow-up question, because this is something I really want to get into. Go ahead, Connie. So what was there any reaction from your daughter about the book?
So to Natalie's point, it's been interesting to watch the other daughters as well. I think, Aisha was the most progressive in that she shared with Arwa along the way what she was writing, and I'll let her talk about that. Jossie processing it. My daughter, Shelby, sees it as this really neat legacy. Hasn't really sees it as a love and a gift, but not really applying it just yet. And you know what? Okay. Again, it's about layers. And one, she felt love that we spent the time to do that, and and dedicated it to her. Two, it says nice things. In the future, it may mean even more. So on a spectrum, it's like I see it as Arwa kind of was out in front, which that's no surprise, and then Jossie is now kind of, and Shelby will then take it to the next, the next level, if you will. So they're all at different. It's a marathon. We're all at different stages of understanding, developing, and embracing what we as mothers have given our children.
Excellent. And then, Aisha, I would like to know what was how did you decided to put the story, and what was the thought behind how to create the chapters, or how to create, you said that it was the letter, at the end was the letter, at the beginning, the letter to write to the daughters. So what was the thought behind to putting those pages together and sorting out the book?
I want also to mention the title of the book and to show the book if possible.
Yes, please.
It's called Three Wise Moms. And like Natalie and Connie said, throughout this discussion, the way we wanted to do it is what are some of the important lessons we've learned in our lives that we want our daughters to have. So that determined the topics of each of the chapters. And it also, for me, gave me an opportunity to discuss some of these issues with Arwa. So for every chapter I worked on, it was a value that I thought it was very important for her to have. And we discussed it as I was writing it. So and she contributed a lot into the discussion, because she shared with me the challenges that she and her friends in school were facing. And so that really shaped how we did this in terms of our ability to decide on what topics to be looking at.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm interested to know that you are not the only moms who have been writing for their daughters. They are also other moms in the book and sharing their wisdom. Tell me about the other moms.
So we broadened it, and the premise behind the other moms was similar hearts and minds as ours. Also friends, family that we adore, and have a foundation of love, and who had similar wants and desires for their children. So we broadened it. We felt like it was for girls and boys. The other piece was we originally, it was to be something inspirational, either a quote from the Bible or Quran, or inspirational quote, a quote from a person that is a leader or a public figure. and then it was a story, and then it completed with resources like, if you want to know more, read this or look at that. But Natalie actually had a really good idea as well. And it wasn't just about us sharing the information with our children and, okay, dumping, here you go, boom. Natalie said, why don't we add a page for them to add their thoughts? So it's not a book and it's not a journal. It's a live, living, breathing document of sorts that shares a mother's wisdom and engages a daughter's thoughts. And so it's kind of unique. There are a few other books out there similar to it, but not very many at all. And so, you know, I just want to thank Natalie for that encouragement. It was one of the latter editions. If you would, Aisha, do you mind holding the book up again? So the picture on here is of a tree, and of course, there's a tree starts as a seed and grows into a beautiful tree, and you can see the leaves are beginning to blow away. And if you turn it to the back, please, Aisha. The leaves continue on to the back, and the quote there is, you know, these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. So as our daughters were, you know, kind of leaving this tree, and this, you know, the love goes with them and stays with them, and is kind of, again, that core constant that they can count on.
Excellent. Coming from a different background, so from the white background, Japanese background, and Middle Eastern, Yemenis background, so how this background really helped you, or perhaps challenged you, to come up with your ideas about writing the book. So I'm going to start with Connie. So tell me how this. I mean, right now we are talking about white privilege and how they can use their power in this day and time to just address some of the issues. But I'm wondering, your background. So how did it help to bring your wisdom, and then how Aisha's background bring growing up in Yemen, and also Natalie?
Well, and I'll speak broadly. I do think that sometimes us Americans are privileged, arrogant, and individualist versus the rest of the world. I didn't see that necessarily as a benefit to me, other than by learning through this process and this book from both Natalie and Aisha. I certainly began to think differently and realize some of the implicit bias that I might have. So it kind of confirmed for me some of the different topics that we wrote on, and the importance of them. And it also made me question some areas on how I would think about things, instead of rushing in and fixing something and it's this American way. It's more of what's the right word, Natalie, that you all use, and Aisha? It's more of a community, a family, a village.
Yeah.
Village.
All of the above.
Yes.
Approach. And that was because I love these ladies and I respect them and I trust them. It really made me look a little deeper and a little differently.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Excellent. Deeper and differently. How about for you, Aisha?
I think it was very clear to me, just working together and knowing each other, that the basic values are all the same. We may emphasize one value over the other, but the premise and the basic is all similar. And even with the faith traditions that we all come from, I always feel it comes from the same source. And I always say, based on Sufism, is there are as many paths to God as there are human beings. Our objective and our end place that we all want to go to is the same, but we may take different paths to reach that place. And then we will all reunite there as well. So it wasn't difficult, it was enriching to work with the people who view things differently. I've learned quite a bit from working with Natalie and with Connie on this, that added to my knowledge base, and also on how I interact with other people, but also how I interact with my own daughter, because we learn every day from one another. So it was actually something that enriched my being. It enriched my relationship with my daughter and with my family. And like you said, this is how peace is built, is by breaking barriers, and understanding what we fear most is something that we don't understand. But once we understand that those fear barriers are gone.
Yes, absolutely. And for you, Natalie.
So, just hearing these words from you, Connie, and you, Aisha, really profoundly impacted me. So, I wanted to say thank you for that. And I felt the same way about the way that we approach this book and this writing. What comes to mind for me is trust, and that trust is often a word that is taken for granted, or that um, it's thrown out in the vernacular, but we trust is actually actionable. And what I learned profoundly from Connie and Aisha is what trust looks like in action and what trust feels like. And so we were having to trust each other that the words that we said would resonate with one another, perhaps, and they definitely did. The words that Connie wrote resonated with me and with my daughter, and I hope vice versa. But I really learned that when you get into a project that pours your heart and soul out, like this one did, you have to do it within the safety of people whom you trust. And so my trust for Connie and Aisha is very profound. And so I think, and became more so as I saw the integrity and I saw the wisdom, everything that we wrote about, I saw that in action with Connie and Aisha, and it allowed me to trust even further. And so the book writing process for me was very much, I think, an unfolding and an exploration and a bearing of my own soul. And it was very rewarding and meaningful. And I hope that our daughters find that meaning that got poured into it as they read it.
Yes, yes. And we are going to get to that very quickly. Please stay with me. You are watching To Peace Mindedly, a podcast show featuring peaceful bridge makers. There is a chance that you are listening to Peace Mindedly. So I just wanted to mention something. For this program, I am live streaming the program on Facebook. And then right now, I just want to honor the people who has been joining us for these conversations. Beya Khan, Barjis Kohan, and Zohra Jamshidi commented on the program about how wonderful my guests are and these mom authors. Thank you so much for joining us. And then right after this program, I'm talking with Representative Shelley Kloba about some of the stories and news that is unfolding in the United States and in our state, Washington State, and around the Seattle. You can find this program and other interviews on Peace Mindedly, and we are available on podcast, iTunes podcast program, on Apple Podcast, on Google Podcast, and iHeartRadio, and many other podcast platforms that you do listen to for your audio pleasures. For this hour, I'm talking to Aisha Jumaan, Connie Cooper She, and Natalie Thompson, mom authors who wanted to share their wisdom and lessons they learned from life to their daughters. They wanted to just pass this legacy through a book. Aisha Jumaan is a public health professional and currently managing health projects in her birth country, Yemen. Connie Cooper is mom, sister, friend, and recognized marketing professional at P&G, Cloak, Hershey, and Starbucks. Natalie Thompson is an educator, entrepreneur, and is currently a city planner at the Greater Seattle area. I have the book with me, and we are talking about this book. It is okay. So bear with me. I needed to do this. It's Three Wise Moms, Our Lessons, Your Life, and then we are talking about the same book with these three wise moms. So I wanted to see if you could please choose a passage of the book, and then just tell me a little bit about the passage that you've written, and also tell me the story behind that, and whether or not you have any story to share from your daughters about the passage. But mainly, I really want us to get a sense of the book. So the passage and the story behind it, and what you really wanted to accomplish with that particular passage. So who would like to go first?
So should the oldest go first, Connie?
Okay, Connie, go.
Oh, did I just volunteer myself? I couldn't.
Yes, you did.
Oh, gummit. So one passage comes to mind because when you initially read it, it's counterintuitive, and it's on power. And I believe the only good use of power is to give it away. And a story that I had was profound when I was in college. There was an individual that was very cruel to me in a time where I was very vulnerable. And that individual later came to ask my help for a very important contest they were in. And I really didn't have time. They came to me at 5 o'clock on a particular day, and they needed it by 8 a.m. the next morning. I was busy until very late in that evening. And so I had a certain power, if you will, to either help or hurt that individual. I did what, I was required to do. It was in college. I had a test. And so I studied until 12. And then from 12 to 6 a.m., I worked on helping this individual with their particular contest and what they needed that only really I could provide at that time. And in the next morning, I didn't.
Connie, can you tell us more? So what was the cruelty and what was the project? Tell me more.
So the cruelty was I was a brand new freshman in college, joining an organization. Some folks were making noise. This particular woman came in and screamed profanities at me and said I was a stupid bitch, and what was I doing? And I didn't know anyone and was overwhelmed. It wasn't even me making the noise. And so I didn't care for this lady very much. They say that people will forget what you do, but not how they make you feel. That didn't make me feel good. So the particular contest was, this woman was doing a beauty contest and frankly had no talent. And so she knew that I could write very well. And she had an outfit that she wanted to wear. She wanted to wear an artist outfit. And she said, can you write me something to tie this all together? So it was no easy feat at all. And so I made up the best stuff that you can imagine. It was incredible about how the world is your canvas and the colors and, how you bring it to life. And anyway, she won second in the particular contest for beauty and won first in talent, which is hilarious. But what that told me was that when you have the power to help or to hurt, the only good use of that power is to give it away and to for benefit. And so that to me is where true power lies, is in doing the right thing and giving to others, not in hurting others, but in helping others.
Did you write a letter about this to your daughter?
Yes. So there's a segment in there on power. She read it and said, "Of course you did," which I think was a good compliment to me, in saying that she didn't, I guess in her upbringing, she didn't see a different way of thinking. And so that was a validation in my momhood, if you will, that, well, that's great. That all she sees is to use whatever gifts, power, time, money, people that you have for the greater good is actually increasing your circle of influence and increasing who you are as a person and the legacy that you lead.
So can you read that letter for us?
You know what? I don't have the book in front of me.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But
So,
maybe Aisha could read it.
so were you ladies able to hear or listen to what Connie was saying?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. So probably Aisha can read the passage. I'm going to go to Natalie, and then I'm going to ask her about her story, and then we come back to Aisha with two things. First, her story, and then Connie's letter. So yes, go ahead, Natalie.
Yeah, so one of my favorite letters is one of the shortest letters that I wrote to my daughter, and it's on gratitude.
I want the
And
story behind that. So what
yeah,
happened? You decided you write this letter to your daughter.
so the story behind it and behind every letter is that I really wanted Jossie to get that these lessons or virtues are practiced. And the way you form your muscle around it is to live it day in, day out, and to practice that. And I think we talk about that all the time. So in this letter around gratitude, what came to me was that it's very easy to be grateful for what our culture might consider good fortune. You know, it's very grateful. It's very easy to be grateful for the new house or the new car or the promotion. But really, the profound gratitude that I experience is in the smallest moments. It's in the breathtaking sunrise. It's in the smile of a baby. It's in the walk through nature. And so, what I was hoping to express because of my own experiences with gratitude in these small moments, the same way that my daughter and all our daughters can enrich their lives in deeply profound ways by experiencing gratitude, not in these big moments of fortune, but in these small moments and quiet moments often.
Mm-hmm. And what is the letter?
So the letter is in gratitude. I'm just going to read a couple of notes from it. And so gratitude can be practiced, as I said earlier, when you stop, take notice, and give thanks for everything: a beautiful sunrise, a great meal, a good friend. The practice of gratitude can become a habit. Once this habit is established, it will enhance your life beyond measure. It is fine to be grateful for what the world calls good fortune, good grades, money, championships, which were important to our girls at that time. There's nothing wrong with these things coming your way by any means, but the kind of gratitude that will fill your soul is the gratitude for the intangibles in life, the kind word, the gentle smile, and the beauty of nature.
Very good. And you think that Joycey had received those wisdoms?
I think that's a work in progress too. She's 20, and I feel like the trappings of life are very intoxicating. And so, like everything, it's a practice. So
Absolutely.
she's, yeah,
Very good.
learning.
Yes, and Aisha, it's your turn to tell us about this story. So I want to give us the story behind and then read the letter and read Connie's letter.
Of course. For me, it's compassion because I think it's such an essential thing. And even what Connie and Natalie just spoke about, they also are encompassed in the word compassion. The story behind the compassion letter that I wrote to Arwa was a very, very good friend of mine who had breast cancer. She's had several recurrences and was told she had a few months to live. She lived actually 6 years after that. But she struggled through those 6 years. And she was always in and out of the hospital. However, she remained in a very good spirit. She defied even the expectations of her physicians. And the joys in life for her, I discovered, was spending time with Arwa. And Arwa at that point in time was about 2 years old. And she didn't have any grandchildren. So we spent a lot of time with Afaf. And she would make a plan and we'll go to her house, Arwa and I. And she would spend so much time, and Arwa loved being with her. She considered her a grandma. And so we just spent a lot of her last years in life spending time together, to the point where when she bought a house in Florida, and I called one day and she wasn't feeling well, we decided that we're going to drive from Atlanta to Georgia to Florida to spend some time with her. She convinced us to buy a home in Florida, which we did in just that short visit. And we continually went to there where she would spend time with us and with Arwa. When she passed away, we still have the house, and that's where Arwa, has, and we have our best memories, because whenever we went to our Florida home, it was always time off. When I walk in the beach, I can almost see Afaf and hear her in my heart talking to me and smiling at me. So it was the act of compassion that I experienced with her, but also that the reward from that compassion is that we developed a very strong ties with her, and we all had a beautiful home that we still have, that we continue to use, that brings so many good memories. And again, what's going on in the world today, I think it's quite important to have compassion. So with Arwa, anytime she has a situation like Connie had, where someone may need her help when she is not inclined to say yes, I push the compassion story on her. This is something that you need to do because it's important. And I think also because of my Muslim background and the Muslim faith, despite all the Islamophobia that's going on in the world, and especially in the US and Europe, the Quran talks about God being compassionate and merciful 114 times. That's quite a number of times. And so it's something that is very close to my heart.
Mm-hmm. What is the letter?
I'm going to read, it's actually very long, but so I'm going to read a little bit from Connie's first.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So
let us do this for the sake of the program. Can you read yours, just a few paragraphs, 2-3 paragraphs, and then go to Connie?
So I think from mine, I say compassion plays an important role in parenting and all that we do. It is compassion that allows parents to care for and love their children. It is also the pillar that we rely on, especially during difficult interactions. It is an important trait to cultivate and instill in ourselves and others.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. And now Connie's.
Connie's. So Connie,
Just pick a small part.
Yes. So she said, the epiphany I had that night was that I had the power. I could have said yes or no. I could have forgiven or harbored bitterness. I could help or hurt another. My choice that day and ever since has been to try to rise above the hurt, always help an outstretched hand, and use my gifts for good.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we don't have much time. I want us to be as brief as possible, if it's possible. So we talked about compassion, gratitude, and giving out power. So I want you to, if your daughter comes to you and asks about George Floyd and what happened to her and about the death, from that point of view, how would you explain your feelings, or how would you talk about the death and killing to your daughters from that perspective? So who would like to go first?
I'd like to go first,
Yes, Aisha.
because this is something that we've been discussing quite a bit at home, and it's something that's not you. So I think for me, the killing of George Floyd is it just shows that racism is institutionalized in this country. It's an institutional racism. To have 4 men, police officers, who are there to protect us, the citizens, think it's okay that a young man is killed in front of them and by one of them, and not a single one of them thought it's wrong or tried to stop it. That's for me, again, because people talk sometimes about reverse racism. There is nothing that's called reverse racism. There is only racism that's institutionalized. And this is just, one way of documenting and showing that racism, and not just in the police force, it's actually institutionalized through a lot of organizations that are supposed to serve the public and the civilians.
From their compassion point of view, so how do you see this? So racism is constitutionalized and then institutionalized, and then we are dealing with this issue. So what is if we want to explain this from a compassion point of view, how do you explain it?
I think, again, from the compassion point of view, this should never be done, period. But also, I think what I told Arwa and continue to tell Arwa, that we need to speak up when something is wrong. So we can use our compassion, even if the person in front of us doesn't have it, to say when something is wrong, not to be quiet. And there's been a lot of talk about racism and what it means. People say, but I'm not a racist. That's not enough. What I want people to do is to be anti-racist. So it's not enough to say, I'm not a racist, but I'm not going to get into this. But it's also true about all the injustices in the world. The reason they propagate is because we don't have a mass of people who stand up to them and say, this is wrong. And that's where I saw these 3 other officers standing there and not doing anything about it. So
it's no compassion.
They would have said no. But it's also about everything we see in our life. When we see something wrong, I think we need to speak up. And
Excellent.
The more people speak up, the less likely we're going to have situations like these.
Very
May
good.
I add to that?
Yes, please, go ahead.
So one of the things I was going to talk about, it's interesting, kind of came around to landing here, is the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil. The only thing necessary is for good men and women to do nothing. And so, that's where the power comes in. We are obligated in the Bible, in the Quran, and correct me if I'm wrong, Aisha, but we are called to do only 2 things by our God. And that's to love him with all our hearts and to love each other as ourselves. nowhere in what happened to George does that exist. Racism is real. Racism is a sin, and there should be no tolerance for that.
Very well said. Very well said. Natalie, is your turn. Go ahead.
Yeah, so if I were to add one more letter in the book, it would be around accountability. And exactly what Connie and Aisha said beautifully is that racism is systemic, it's structural, and it's going to take all of us working in solidarity with compassion, using our power for good, in gratitude that we get to live this life where we get to dismantle what has been so terribly prevalent in our country for 400 years. And the piece that I think would add to this book, maybe this is a part two, Connie and Aisha, is holding people to account until we get to such time that we function from that place of deep love and compassion. And until we get there, again, which is going to take all of us, we do not stand by when people metaphorically or literally have their knee on the neck of someone else. And that I hope we do better. I hope our country does better. And that when we get to that place of compassion and love, there will be no more need for Three Wise Mom books.
I think there's always need for peace, love, compassion, and moms all around the world. I do not agree with you, Natalie. But here, yes, but here is what I would like us to do is at the end of the program, I end the program with something. I want my guests to share something meaningful about peace, compassion, kindness, and for the sake of our conversation, we are just give me 1 second. We are talking about Three Wise Moms, Our Lessons, Your Life. This is the book. I really enjoyed reading the book, and I think I'm gonna use it for my daughter, and most probably I'm gonna have her to read it. And I know that she does it gladly because she just loves books. But for here, I want us, our authors, to share with us something about peace, kindness, and compassion. Or if you want to share a statement, a prayer, or something that we can take away from this conversation. I'm going to start with Natalie, and then we have about 7 minutes, then Connie, then Aisha. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Natalie.
First of all, Sara, thank you so much for having us today. It's been a joy. I would like to, I guess, echo what Connie said at the beginning with three things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. And love to me is and can be a verb. It's not a sentiment. It is the way that we demonstrate our deepest gratitude for being human and the humanity that crosses any ethnicity, culture, religion, which is what I have found with Connie and Aisha. This deep love of humanity, of divinity, of each other that has hopefully been instilled in the way we have raised our daughter, hopefully has been instilled in our words in this book, and I know lives in my heart. And so in deep gratitude and love of these two amazing women, and to you too, Sara, I hope your listeners enjoy this book. I hope your daughter enjoys and gets a lot out of this book. And I just love you all.
Excellent. Three Wise Moms, Our Lessons, Your Life. They're going to talk with us about peace. Connie, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Natalie.
No worries. No worries. That's okay.
All right. sorry, it's real.
We are
Yeah,
in our houses, so it happens.
yes, I apologize.
No worries.
Thank you, COVID-19. Um, Natalie, you said almost exactly what I was going to say. My focus was on love as a verb, and as a peace as an outcome of that.
Mhm.
Um, uh, Peace is an outcome. It's not necessarily what you do, or through love and through surrender and through putting our fellow man and women first. There is great peace and great serenity in that, and should be the lens of which we look through everything with. So I won't, Sarah, I won't reiterate what Natalie said, because I think she said it beautifully. In fact, I was just going to go like this, like drop the mic, like we're done. Thank you, Natalie. And thank you, Sarah. And this has been probably more of a blessing to me than it has been to you all. I get to see my two friends, except it makes my heart hurt because I do love them so much. And I'm grateful for their time that I got to spend closer to them in my life, and hope again that our paths cross.
Inshallah. And Aisha.
First of all, like everybody said here, I'm grateful that we're all together because we do miss each other, and I know I miss them. What I want to use is a verse from the Quran that says, we made you into nations and tribes so that you may know one another. And so our differences, whether it's in color, whether it's in faith, whether it's in location, has a purpose. And the purpose is that we get to know each other and we get to learn from each other. And that's how peace is made. That's how fear is defeated, by getting to know one another. And the experience that we have that brought us so close and brought, love and to in our hearts, not just to between the three of us, but for humanity, for the nation we live in, for everyone, is something that can be experienced by a lot of people if they just allow themselves to learn and be open to the wisdom that exists in each one of us. Because at the very end, we are all sacred creatures because we have God's soul in us. That's how we were created. So that's what I would like to end up with. I'm grateful that God has given me the chance to be with my friends and to bring us close together.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you very much. You are listening to Peace Mindedly, a podcast show. I feature peaceful bridge makers. You are also watching Peace Mindedly on Facebook and on YouTube. More than welcome to write your comments on the comment box. I do see that, and I try my best to feature them. So for this hour, I am talking with three wise moms: Natalie Thompson, Connie Cooper She, and Aisha Jumaan. Thank you so much for being with us. Natalie, Aisha, and Connie, I say goodbye to you. But to my audiences, I am still here, and I'm bringing my next. Oh, okay. Hold on. Sorry. Okay. Thank you so much, and God bless. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Okay, now I would like to bring Representative Shelly Klobo. I think I did something wrong, and I would like to make sure she's going to be here. It's my fault, and she's going to come back. Okay, so stay with me for a second until I know what's going on. Hi, Shelley. I'm so sorry. I think I just pushed the wrong button. Can you please come back to the studio? Yeah. I am here. Yes, just one more time. Thank you. Excellent. Very good. Now I have you. It's very good to see you, Shelley. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing fine.
Hello, hello, hello. First, I wanted to say hello, and then I'm just going to come back after the introduction. Please stay with me.
Perfect.
Okay, so my friends, peace lovers and peacemakers, this is Sara Jamshidi for Peace Mindedly, a podcast show. I feature peaceful bridge makers. For the previous hour, we were talking with three wise moms about their book, Three Wise Moms, Our Lessons, Your Life. And then for this hour, I asked Representative Shelley Kloba to join us for the conversation. There are, one thing that it's really dominant in my mind and many people's mind is, so basically, what happened to George Floyd and how we can take action. One thing that I noticed is sometimes we as the public have hesitation to reach out to our public officials and to talk to them, or perhaps to demand what we really want from them to do. So for that reason, I asked Representative Shelley Kloba to share her wisdom and what we really, in her opinion, what are the steps that we need to take, or just walk us through the process of having the legislation making to the law, and what is the process, and just hear from someone who is doing this day in, day out. For the sake of disclosure, I just need to mention that my husband has contributed to Representative Shelley Kloba's re-election campaign. We are live streaming the conversation, and then here's the thing. Please write to us. This is, if I can go here, so I can show you. Write to us your questions, your comments. I do my best to feature them here on the program. So for this hour, I'm talking with Representative Shelley Kloba, Washington State Legislature. Shelley started her journey to Washington State Legislation building as a parent advocating for her daughter's public school. Inspired by her experience advocating for her local PTA, she took the journey further and eventually was elected in the State House of Representatives in 2016. I'm going to bring Representative Shelley Kloba, and then we are going to have an amazing discussion about basically what's happening in the country. Hello, Shelley.
Hello, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me on your program.
Absolutely. It's an honor. It's an honor. Thank you so much for making yourself available in such a short notice. I truly appreciate that. So right before this program, I was talking with three moms, and then I asked the question that I would like to ask the same question from you. Let's say, I know that you have one daughter, like many of us, and then your daughter comes to you and say, hey, mom, what's happening with George Floyd? And what are all of these things are going around us, and what is your reaction? I want to know, what is your response to your daughter?
You know, for me personally, it really comes down to the fact that America has not lived up to its aspirational goals that we have for ourselves of freedom, justice, and opportunity for all. And there have been times in our history, and now is one of them, where it becomes blatantly obvious of this shortcoming that we have as a society and as a democracy, that we are not living up to our shared dream. And for a lot of people, that makes it feel like a myth. And, you know, I would just tell her, I really do truly believe that this is something we can strive to be. There has been progress made in history, but we need these kinds of times to stop and take a look at ourselves and take a look at our systems to figure out, why are we falling short of this dream we have for ourselves?
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Yesterday, the system that you are mentioning was not yesterday, on Tuesday. Again, I was talking with two activists who are taking this further in the state of Washington. And one of the issues that they were raising day in day, throughout the conversation, was we need to fix the system. And you're talking about the system. So, correcting a system is damn difficult thing to do.
Yes, it is. But that should not deter us from starting the work. It should not ever deter us from continuing to do whatever we can do, because each of us are part of a whole entire system, and there's pieces and parts that are going to be accessible to us and not accessible to us. And I saw the other day on Facebook a white man who understands his privilege and his ability to just go for a jog whenever he wants to, and how that very same act is very dangerous and can get you killed for other people. And so he was offering to start a running group and saying, my people who are Black who would like to have a running buddy who's white to help make you feel safer, I want to do that. And I thought it was the most profound example of the idea of you do what you can, where you can, when you can. And when we all put our little piece of it all in together, it can really make a difference. And so that's one of the things I talk about with my daughter too. This is a really hard time. And I'm also telling her, I'm listening to you. Because her experience is, of course, different than mine. She graduated from college and she had exposure to different kinds of classes than I did, where they talked about race and they talked about cultural competency. So I can learn from her as much or more than she can learn from me. And I also want to help her to identify her emotions. And I know as a mom, we see this developmentally in children, I think mostly in the toddler phase. And then it comes back again through the teen years, where they start to experience some really big emotions that are very strong, and they just don't know how to cope with them. And when it's in the toddler phase, it's because suddenly they're physical present, they can be in places and put themselves into situations that are scary. And we need to help them label their emotions. It comes back around again as a teenager, because suddenly, they're starting to get a little bit more freedoms and their bodies are different and society looks at them differently. And we again need to come back to those conversations that we have with our children to help them identify and explore their emotions and do it. You make sure that they know that we are a safe place for them.
Do you have a story for us? A story that okay, go. Yeah, hooray.
Well, in terms of I know we have kind of prefaced a little bit in the conversation about ways that, someone can come to and talk to their legislator about a problem that they're seeing. And, perhaps it can be an example. It's one of my favorite bills that I passed. It, I think, comes in the theme of this is what democracy looks like for me. And a group of taxi cab drivers who specialize in wheelchair accessible taxis. Right? They noticed that the law said that if you are a senior transportation provider, for senior citizens, or if there's a variety of different medical transport companies who can qualify for a disabled license plate and a hanger, and then they can use the disabled parking spaces. But taxi cabs who want to serve disabled customers in wheelchairs can't access those. And so these were largely small business owners. More often than not, they were folks who were first generation immigrants who had come and start a business, and they see this problem. And they're not big, they're not powerful, they're not a part of something larger, but they brought the problem to me. And it hit my heart because my dad is disabled and uses a wheelchair. So little did they know that about me, but that was why I joined in the effort. And we got the ability for them to access that disability plate so that they can serve their clientele better and be safer themselves as they're loading and unloading their clients who need a wheelchair and a ramp to access transportation. And so it's still it still chokes me up to this day that I got to stand outside our legislative building with these, first generation immigrants who came in some cases from countries where their government was nothing but corruption.
Yeah.
And not a dime was exchanged. It was a free meeting of people and their ideas and, coming together with several voices and getting it done. And at the end, they gave me a wonderful box of Godiva chocolates as an appreciation. And so, I don't think that it's an experience they necessarily would have had in their own country. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have had a small part in helping these people understand that their voice matters and they can make change if they come together and connect with the people who can help make the decisions. And those are my favorite kinds of experiences in the legislature. Absolutely.
Yes.
And so I think this is the power that people have.
Yes. So for the sake of the story that you just explained and mentioned, these taxi drivers came to you and wanted you to draft a bill. Exactly. What is the process of drafting a bill?
Well, an idea, it starts with an idea, and either it can come externally or it could be something that I've studied and seen in the news or with conversations. And I sit down with the person who's bringing the opportunity or with our staff members and figure out I examine for myself, like, what is the problem statement that we're trying to solve? What's the impact? How many people does this impact? What's the scale or the scope of the problem? Come up with a proposed solution, and then the staff people are very good. The lawyers can write the actual language that translates the bill idea into legal language, and then I get other people to sign on to the bill as co-sponsors. So my colleagues in the House of Representatives, and then the bill will be heard in a committee, and that's an opportunity for people to come and weigh in while that bill is in that process of hearing. It's helpful to have people who email or call about the particular bill and help me understand what would that impact be on them. Are they in favor? Are they against it? What changes would they like to see made so that they think it would work better? There's a lot of people out there who are experts on things that I am not. And I really rely on folks to be resources for me on that. And then after the committee, it will either die there or it will move on to consideration by the House, if it's a House bill that generated, or in the Senate, where that, if it started over there. And then if it passes and gets 50% plus one on the House floor, then it goes over to the Senate, and the whole process begins again. Back to the committee hearing, back to the Senate floor. And then sometimes things have changed between the two houses, and there's a process by which you come to concurrence. We made this change, you made that change. Do we agree? Yes, good, go forward. Sometimes they die at that point too.
Yes. What makes a bill become stronger? Both in the Senate and in the House of I remember, I just do not want to mess up. So it's not the Congress, it's the Senate and the House of No, it's the Washington State House of Representatives.
You got it. Yes, that's exactly right. Mm-hmm. So how does it get strengthened? By the input that people contribute. And so sometimes that'll be from folks in the industry who might help you understand, well, I know what your goal is, but in order to do that, you'd have to do it, pathway A rather than pathway B. Sometimes that's like, for instance, we have had some conversations about bills related to consumer data privacy. They haven't made it off of the into law yet, but I have seen both years that the bill came forward that it was becoming more and more strong because consumer voices came into the mix. Whereas in the very beginning, it was only the companies that we were hearing from about the bill. And in my mind, if it's consumer data privacy and it's the data that belongs to you and me, then I think those are really strong voices to have. And so I think of that as like a 360-degree view of how will this work and who does it impact? So that's, I think, the first way that you make a bill strong is lots of voices and lots of input. And then the second way, and this is a part that we can never forget, after a bill goes into law, at some point in time in the future, you have to ask yourself that, what I call the Dr. Phil question: how's that working for you? And so you may need to adjust. You may find that it was overkill. You may find that it moved the issue in the right direction, but it wasn't enough. And so just that constant review effort of how are we doing? Have we solved the problem? What else do we need to be doing differently?
So let's say that what kind of bill is a good bill that can pass? What kind of bill you think that we can draft about George Floyd's killing and incident? What kind of bill we are looking at if we write a kind of bill that we want to pass in both Senate and Congress?
I think it would involve making sure that you have all the stakeholders at the table. And that is just a fancy word for people who have an interest. And so bringing to the table the folks who are the most impacted. And so that's going to be on both sides. That will be the folks who are being oppressed, whose rights are being trampled on, who are getting bearing the brunt of this. And
so basically black people, black activists.
Absolutely.
Yes. One. And then probably the police department.
Yeah. You have to get law enforcement at the table. And even the broader issue too, I think, involves how people are dealt with within the court system itself too. And so, the whole legal system, the prosecutors, the defense attorneys, all of that has to be at the table. So we're getting the input, and you can get a lot done if you can focus on the goal and sometimes leave behind the reason someone wants to get to that goal. And so I call that being motivation agnostic. You might want something to happen because of your particular perspective on why you think it needs to happen. I might want it to happen for an entirely different reason. But if we're still both focused on that same goal, we should work together. Forget about why. We should be able to work together.
So for a bill, I know that your focus is on not exactly on police department or law enforcement, is on different committees. But for the sake of example, the goal that we're looking at to write this bill, what kind of goal or what kind of issues that we include in this bill that you think might be something meaningful?
I think one of the things would have to be some addressing of the idea of de-escalation. What is there currently? Law enforcement officers are trained in de-escalation, but does there need to be more? Does it need to be different? I think that's one area. Another area could be, it's a little bit broad, but accountability. When something bad does happen, then how do we hold people accountable? How do we do restorative justice that makes sure that the person who, was in the wrong understands why and makes amends and changes their behavior for future? And, so any kind of accountability, I think, is an important piece. And I mean, those are kind of broader generalizations, but I think that those are important places that we should probably start.
Is it really intimidating to reach the public officials?
Well, it's my view on that has changed a little bit, because I just feel like I'm a mom. I'm a normal person. But I do remember that when I first started getting involved in politics, when I think of it as being like an armchair advocate for my daughter, I started to learn that it wasn't just, issues it maybe in my daughter's school, but it was broader than that. And so I do remember the first time I went to meet with an elected official, and it was nerve-wracking. And I remember
Why
the
it
first
was
time
nerve-wracking, Shelley?
I think because any of us, I think it's a human nature, we discount our own, the value of our knowledge and experience. And so it feels like, well, I don't know anything and I'm going up and this person must be an expert. Well, here's a little secret. We're not experts. We might be experts in certain areas, or I think myself, I'm a little more of a generalist. I could talk to you for 10 minutes about anything, but I'm an inch wide or an inch high and a mile wide in my knowledge. And so I rely on people coming to me who have experience. And what I eventually started telling advocates that I was working with Parent Teacher Association was, you are the expert when it comes to how public policy affects your child and your school and your community. And legislators need to hear from you. And so I continue to try to do that. So I do understand that it can feel a little intimidating. I hope that through a variety of channels, you can email us, you can phone our offices. This is the interim period between sessions. And this is a time when we are typically in our communities, reaching out, listening, looking for bill ideas, working with those stakeholder groups to try to shape our bills so that they're ready to go in December. And when the session starts again in January, we can, hit the ground running.
What kind of people who really reach out to you? I know that we had this conversation yesterday in our, and then I'm guessing probably, I just want to know who really reaches out to you.
Unfortunately, it is oftentimes people who are a little more connected and a little more politically savvy. But at the same time, I get probably 5 emails a week these days about people trying to access their unemployment insurance benefits. And so, it's kind of across the board. I imagine that some of these folks have never reached out before. And so that is a problem that I think we don't necessarily hear from everyone we need to hear from. And oftentimes when it is a societal problem, if we want to try to make sure that we get healthcare to everyone, the people who are suffering the most and who have the most pressure in their lives because they don't have appropriate healthcare, they're overwhelmed by that. They're never going to be the person who reaches out to us. And so I rely on organizations who represent people who I know are going to have a difficulty and barriers for whatever reason to reach out. And then I also try, and I know my colleagues do this too, that we'll also try to be listening in the community in places like on social media and ways that we can hear conversations from people who wouldn't think to come to talk to us directly, and maybe don't even know how much we can be helpful. So I remember when I was on Kirkland City Council and we first approved the sale or a business license for a cannabis retail store in our community. And our community had voted 65% in favor of having this. But then when it came to their neighborhood, it was a different thing. And so I made sure that we not only listened to the people who came to the city council meeting and wrote us, called us, emailed us, but I also recognized that there are people, because of stigma around cannabis use, there are people who will never reach out to me publicly. And so I tried to find ways to listen in on conversations in other groups or read other things so that I could have an understanding of not only the people who talk to me, but the people who can't or won't.
Many people think that there is no use of reaching out to the public officials because they don't listen. They do not take action on what the individuals want them to do. And this is one side of the coin. And the other side of the coin is many people are just dropping off, seeking for politics because, they think that it's just boring or it doesn't get them anywhere and so forth and so on. So at one point, this stigma probably, or this experience that I'm not going to go anywhere if I go to the public officials, and on the other side, people are not approaching politics. So how do you see these two sides of the coin?
Yeah, I think that in a large part, myself and my colleagues are responsible for some of that. And I can understand the perception that, well, I sent them an email and I never got a response. Sometimes, depending on when it is you're sending it, when we're in the middle of session and we're doing, 18-hour days, we might just not have the time. Now, our legislative assistants read our emails and report to us and let us know, this is how many we got on this, or this is what people are saying. So your input does make it through, but it won't feel like that to you if you wrote me an individual letter necessarily. And it might take me, I'm still working on replying to emails that I got during the session. So some of that is, I will take on that, my own responsibility to understand that feels to people that they haven't gotten through. I do read my email and I do try to respond. The other part too is that, I have 140,000 people in my legislative district here in the 1st legislative district, and they are interested in an awful lot of things, and they have divergent opinions on an awful lot of things. And just from a cognitive workload and just 24 hours in a day, by the nature of that, I have to focus on sometimes particular areas. So a person might get kind of a short response or something that's not terribly inspiring from me about issue X, but it's only because I simply don't have the bandwidth. And so I can understand how that feels disappointing too, but I have told people more often than not, when you reach out to me, it puts a thought in my head and a feeling in my heart that I don't know necessarily when that seed will bloom, but sometimes under the right conditions, it will. And I had a constituent one time tell me, I asked her a broad question about, what is it you need me to understand about you and your priorities in order to represent you well in Olympia? Nice, big, broad, open-ended question. And she said, well, I don't really know much about politics or what you do down there, but you have to know drug court saved my life. And I said, well, tell me more about that. I don't know anything about drug court, but this sounds really interesting. And she told me the story of how she had struggled with alcoholism her whole life. And then finally, the accountability and the treatment, that combination with this diversion court, that if she could, get sober, stay sober, pay off the debts to the people she had harmed through her nonviolent crime, she could stay out of jail and it would get removed from her record and she could move forward. And that is what was the thing that finally did it for her, the treatment plus the accountability. And she said, I rebuilt my life with my family, and she had reconnected, and it was wonderful. And she said, I just need you to know that was a life-saving program for me. And I said, I don't know what I will do with that information right now, but I am so glad you told me. And then that was my first session, and I got down there, and there was a bill that, because I knew her story, when someone approached me with the idea to broaden what we fund for those treatment courts into some other recovery support services, I thought, oh, yes, I know that would work. And I know that it would be a good investment. And so, later on, I was able to pass a bill that did that very thing. And I only had that interest because that woman had brought that up to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So just talk to public officials.
Yes.
Okay.
And maybe give us a little grace if we don't get back to you right away. Be persistent but kind. And
yes.
And you get a lot further with honey than vinegar. You catch a lot more flies. And so, if you can try to make sure that when you reach out, you're very civil and set the tone for mutual respect, it often is much more helpful and productive conversation.
Excellent. Say with me, Shelley. You are watching To Peace Mindedly, a podcast show I feature peaceful bridge makers. You are also listening to Peace Mindedly, a podcast show featuring peaceful bridge makers. In this hour, I'm talking with Shelley Kloba, a representative for Washington State, and I really wanted her to explain what's going on with the George Floyd and if we wanted to reach out to public officials about this matter, what we need to do. And then here I want Shelley to tell us, Shelley, what is, in your opinion, what is white supremacy and how we can cure that?
It's the system by which the white race has put the needs and priorities of white people ahead of others. And I think some of it has to start with each and every one of us examining for ourselves how the systems that we live in have either advantaged or disadvantaged us. And that's going to be a varied question, but it's going to be a personal response for every single one of us. And when we can start to have that real conversation with ourselves, we then can start to see it out in our communities about, why does my neighbor have this experience when my experience is different? And the causes of that, is there something systemic happening that makes it so? And then, you can in broader and broader and broader circles about how that works. And
yes,
and I think it comes maybe from a fairly deep-seated human tendency that I think we all have towards tribalism, and that to make myself feel better, I need to understand how different you are, how different we are, and other you. Like, this is my tribe, and you are different and other. And in sports teams, we do it with, all the different aspects of our identity. If someone says, "Oh, hey, I grew up in Illinois," I'm like, "Oh, me too." Oh, we're just alike. And I mean, we're constantly trying to figure out ways we are alike and ways that we are not when we interact with another person. And so I think it's generally a human instinct to do that. But when it comes to a point where not only are we different, but I'm better because, that's when we run into problems.
Have you ever said that, I'm better because?
Oh, if I have to be totally honest, I think inside of my mind, I probably have. And I think each and every one of us has. And it is not fun, and it is not pretty to lift up and look underneath those dark spaces within our own minds and our hearts. But once you start doing it, I think you open yourself to a much richer, more interesting experience. And it's difficult work, but I think each of us has to do that.
What is your biggest shortcoming?
Oh, I think it's, I am by nature a procrastinator. And every once in a while, and it's on a random reward cycle, I get rewarded for being late, and so inadvertently,
you get rewarded for being late.
I do. Like, I'll show up to a meeting late, and all of a sudden, they're still, figuring out their technology on the Zoom. I'm like, yay! I missed that first 5 minutes, and it worked out for me because I didn't have to sit through all of that because they're just getting started now. And so, you're married to someone who understands a intermittent reward cycle and how powerful that is as a motivator. So sad to say, it's for me.
Excellent. At the end of the program, I ask my guests to close the program with something meaningful about peace, about compassion and kindness. And I wanted to hear your statements, whether you would like to share a prayer, a statement, or something that you think we can take away from this conversation about peace and being peaceful and kind and compassionate.
Well, I don't know that my mother specifically said this, but this feels like a thing that a mother would say. And so I'm adopting it. And that is that it costs you nothing to be kind. And it's interesting, and I noticed this through all the volunteer work that I did too, that whenever you extend something of yourself into someone else, that obviously they reap the benefit of that, but you do too. And kindness comes back to you. And so I think it costs you nothing, and it's an investment that really makes a difference. And so I would really want to encourage, everyone to be able to do that in their own lives.
Absolutely. Very good. Thank you so much, Shelley, for being my guest in the program and answering my questions. So how people can find you?
So, well, I wanted to say thank you so much for having this conversation, having this space to really dig deep and have these discussions. And as a person who's always been an advocate, anytime I can encourage other people to do so, I really like that. So any legislator you can reach by using the same formula. It's first name, period, last name at leg.wa.gov. So for me, it's Shelley and that's with a EY, Shelley.kloba@leg.wa.gov. And I'm just gonna
Yes.
put it right here.
Excellent.
Okay, no typos.
Excellent. Awesome. Very good. I'm going to post it on the Facebook, and then no procrastination, and you you read the emails and you get back to people.
Exactly. Yes.
Very good. Thank you so much for being my guest. Appreciate it.
So nice to see you again, Sarah.
Thank you. Khuda Hafiz.